Good evening. Welcome to the 10th Annual National Agenda Speaker Series. This year's theme calls attention to the power of us, the people, the citizens of the United States. We've already held two National Agenda Without Borders events, each drawing nearly 500 viewers from nearly 20 states and 4 countries. Tonight, we're continuing the conversation with a veteran journalist who has witnessed numerous White House administrations and also has expertise in national security issues. As always, National Agenda is about demonstrating civil dialogue and engaging with the community. Even though we're virtual, we will be asking audience members to submit questions. So just type your question into chat, select the chat at the bottom of the screen, and it may be selected during our Q&A at the end of this talk. Tonight, Mary Louise Kelly is co-host of All Things Considered, NPR's award-winning evening news magazine. Her recent interviews range from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif to Jane Fonda and Matt Damon. Kelly also served as a national security correspondent, reporting on the CIA, the NSA, and other spy agencies, as well as terrorism, wars, and rising nuclear powers. Her assignments have included North Korea, Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and beyond. And all this with Harvard degrees in government, French language, and literature, as well as a master's degree in European studies at Cambridge. I'm so excited to speak with her. Welcome, Mary Louise.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for that nice introduction, Lindsay. And thank you to University of Delaware for hosting me. This is great. And my only regret is that I have not been to your campus and was so looking forward to it. So you have to have me back.
Definitely, we will. One of your colleagues, Domenico Montanaro, is a UD alum. So it's only pressing that you should come back.
Yes, I'll hold you.
So thanks everybody for joining us virtually. Welcome to the more than 600 folks who have registered for this call, and from Delaware to California to Texas. Our viewers comprise UD alumni, faculty, staff, retirees, and students, as well as many not affiliated with UD. So thanks to all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight and this season for very important conversations. So, Mary Louise, let's start with Pompeo. Secretary of State Pompeo. You interviewed the Secretary of State in January. This feels like a long time ago, but it was less than a year ago. Before we all went down on lockdown, remind us why this interview was important and what happened. Tell us about, as the theme for this talk is, the room where it happened. That thank you, hat tip to Hamilton. What happened in the room?
Yeah. Thank you for just tackling that head on. I did indeed interview Mike Pompeo in late January, which does feel about 17,000 news cycles ago. The room where it happened was 7th floor of the State Department, which is the top floor. I had been in there before with different secretaries of state for interviews, and they hold receptions up there. You know, if you're the king of wherever, or the prime minister, wherever, they hold a big luncheon for you. That has never happened for me, but I've been lucky enough to attend on the sidelines and wander around up there. The Secretary of State has actually a very small actual office, like where their desk is, but it opens onto a lovely living room, and then there's a suite of private conference rooms, and the staff is sitting around there. And then there are more formal reception rooms. And we arranged this interview. I had been asking for it for a while. I think he agreed to talk to me because I was in Iran in early January, and Mike Pompeo is keen to talk about US policy on Iran, and figured I would be interested in discussing that, as I was. So we set it up, and I roll in with my crew, which for an interview like that is a producer who's recording and making sure it sounds okay, an editor who's listening for editorial things, and do we have our facts right? Do I need to follow up on something? Did anybody misstate something? Somebody who's going to write about it for the website. Our diplomatic correspondent, Michelle Kellerman, who has the closest relationship with the State Department, was there. I think that might have been it. I think we were a team of 5 that day. And we sat down in one of the reception rooms with portraits of past secretaries of state around the walls. And I had met Pompeo before and spoken to him. And so we sat down. I'd been told 10 minutes and that's it. And sometimes you can push that a little bit, but you never know. So you need to get right to the point. And I asked about Iran. We spent the first 7 or 8 minutes of the interview on Iran, talking about U.S. policy. And I mean, again, this is 17,000 news cycles ago, but remember, we came close to going to war with Iran in January. This was urgent, and the story that was still, leading the world at that point. And we went around on that, and it was somewhat tense because I was pushing him on how is the U.S. going to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon? Like, what's the plan? What's the end game here? But I had also gone in knowing I have to ask about Ukraine because we were in the middle of a Senate impeachment trial about Ukraine, and he's the Secretary of State, and he was on the famous July 25th phone call that put the whole impeachment process in motion. And he had never really been asked about that. He had not been subpoenaed to appear in any of the impeachment testimony, and he had done a lot of interviews, but had with fairly friendly media, or media that he thought would be friendly to him, and he'd not really been pressed on it. So with the remaining time we had, I tried, and if you listen to that, it's a very terse exchange where he does not want to talk about Ukraine. It is very clear he doesn't want to talk about Ukraine. And we push him and go back and forth, and one of his aides ended up ending the interview slightly before the 10-minute mark. He stood up, not another word, no thank you, no pleasantries, glared at me, left the room. Aides sweep behind him and the doors close. And okay, we knew he'd made news. And so we're packing up to go file for Morning Edition, which was on air. This was a morning interview on a Friday in January. And the double doors to his private office suite open again. And the same aide who had cut the interview short stepped out, looked at me and said, "Come with me. Just you, no producer, no editor, nobody else, just you and no recorder. Leave your mic here." And so we went back to his private living room, and he screamed and swore at me for about 10 minutes and challenged me to find Ukraine on a map, a blank map with no countries marked, no writing, no borders, no nothing. Said people will hear about this, asked if I thought Americans actually cared about Ukraine, used the F word in that sentence and many others. And I thanked him and I left and went and filed for Morning Edition and then later for All Things Considered. That would have made news. I think it made significantly more news that he dropped a statement the next morning on State Department letterhead calling me by name a liar and saying I had lied to him twice and suggesting that I had actually pointed to Bangladesh instead of Ukraine on a map, which I will just note for the record that I have 2 degrees in Europe, have reported from Russia several times, and they're on different continents. It is an experience to, wake up on a Saturday morning and have your inbox a statement on State Department letterhead from the Secretary of State of the United States calling you a liar, and thinking, okay, where do we go from here? And my reaction was the best response would be to show up and do the work again on Monday morning, to try to put an excellent show on the air and let the interview stand for itself. NPR's CEO did an interview, and NPR put out statements defending the reporting and saying we will not be intimidated. And that to me was critical, because we did go back and forth over whether to report the coda to the interview. We had never gone off the record. The reason that I was at the State Department that morning was to interview Mike Pompeo, and he chose to continue the conversation. I didn't want it to be about me. I didn't want it to be something where it looked like I was trying to make him look bad. And that was part of my calculation in terms of how do we discuss what happened in his private living room. But ultimately, I thought it spoke to the character and the actions of the top diplomat of the United States of America, and spoke to the way that this administration interacts with the media. And I felt then, as I have many times, I wasn't there, I was there as me, obviously. I was there representing NPR, obviously, but I was there representing the free press and the right to question the officials who are governing this country.
And so, is this a unique experience, interviewing the Secretary of State?
Yes, I hope so.
Any other political official? Have you had this experience before?
I have not been submitted to any map tests by anyone else. I have interviewed multiple senior members of this administration and others, and never lived through something quite like that.
How does this treatment compare to how political officials in other countries talk to their media?
I mean, I can't speak for how they speak to their media. I can say that I have interviewed the foreign secretaries of other countries, in their countries and in the United States, and I have never had an experience like this. I can't speak for Mike Pompeo, and I wish him well. I really have no, this is not personal in any way. I look forward to interviewing him again at some point. And I look forward to interviewing his successors and all the rest of it. There's no, this is water under the bridge. But what it speaks to is, in an administration where from the very top, the message is that the media is the enemy of the people, that alternative facts are okay, that we live in an era of fake news. There are consequences to that in terms of what becomes acceptable behavior, or what people think will be acceptable behavior. And it felt to me important to draw attention to that. There are consequences. I mean, I'm fine. People have, people have sworn at me before and will again. That's fine. Or not fine, but whatever. But it has occurred to me, reporting from some of the places I have reported from during the Trump administration, from Russia, from North Korea, from Iran, as a reporter whose job is to go in and ask officials their uncomfortable questions, and and really try to find out, what do people who live in other parts of the world, what do they think of their life? What do they think of their government? That's my job, is to go and bring that back to all of you. And you take risks when you do that. Journalists get detained, journalists get arrested. It was a huge calculation when we decided, should we get on a plane to Tehran in January, after the US had just killed Soleimani. I have always had in the back of my mind, I take responsibility for my work. I take responsibility for my own security and that of my team. But it's really nice to know that I have a US passport, and that the US State Department and our government would back me up. And it has crossed my mind more than once on reporting trips in recent years to wonder, would they? Would it be the same as I would have taken for granted in past? I think the answer is yes, but there are consequences to the dynamic that is at play right now between this administration and reporters who are doing their jobs.
Well, can you help us understand, for those of us who aren't journalists or understand the relationship between journalists and the president, how do reporters and sources usually navigate whether things are on or off the record or on background? Can you explain these terms and why some sources choose to go off the record?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I covered, before I became an anchor, covered the intelligence beat and national security for many years, where this is constantly in play, because you're inevitably trying to get sources as close to the information, as close to the action as you can get. And often the people who know the most are those who have the most to risk by talking to you. When you cover the CIA beat or the National Security Agency, as I did for years, those people all get polygraphed regularly. And one of the questions that they get asked is, have you had any unauthorized contact with the press? And any contact with the press is going to be unauthorized if you're working in the clandestine service of the Central Intelligence Agency. So you're navigating the risk to these people of losing their jobs, of their pensions, and how do you fact check something that one person gives you? There are all kinds of calculations that go into that. I because of that, and for other reasons, in an interview where it's remotely going to be an issue. Most of the interviews I do are, I'm talking to somebody in normal times, they would be in the studio. Right now, they're very clearly being recorded. They know it. I always say at the start of an interview, okay, we're going to start recording. Here we go. It's very clear that you're on the record. When it's somewhat less clear, or when somebody's saying, I can tell you this, but off the record, I always define it. And the way I practice journalism is off the record means I cannot use or report what you've told me. I can't do it. I will try to work people from there to being, again, as I practice it, to being on deep background, which means I can say NPR has learned this, that, and the other. I'm not identifying anyone by name or by position. Ideally, you want to move somebody from there to being just, on background, so you can identify them, and then you're negotiating how. I always am negotiating to try to give as much information as I can to help my listeners and readers and audience gauge, does this person actually know what they're talking about? Are they in a position to know this information that they're sharing? So it's a constant negotiation of how you're going to ID to somebody and how you use it. And I will say I have covered national security and foreign policy for, I'm dating myself, 2+ decades, let's leave it there. And I have never violated these rules. You wouldn't last very long on the intelligence beat if you did. In a case like this, we were not on tape, and it gave me pause. It was one of the things I considered in deciding whether to report the coded to the interview. However, you're on the record until you explicitly agree that you're off the record. And in a case like that, where I wasn't just hanging out in his office or bumped into him at the neighborhood Starbucks, I had come to the State Department to interview him. They cut the interview short and then summoned me to continue talking. And so in my mind, we're on the record, unless I agree that we're not. And that was part of the calculation that we made to describe that part of the interview. We also, before we did, called the State Department back, explained to them, we're going to report on that portion of the interview. Do you want to comment or clarify in any way? We will include that. The comment came in the form the next day of that State Department letterhead from Pompeo. But yeah, that is a lesson that I would imprint early and often, because people hear different things. Even journalists use the term on background or off the record in different ways. So I always just say, this is what I mean by it. This is what I'm going to do with the information. This is how I'm going to ID you or not, as we are agreeing to do. And just to very quickly say, to your point of why do you use anonymous sources, it goes back to if you're trying to cover what the CIA is doing, and you only report what the press officer is willing to tell you in a printed statement on the record, you're not going to get very far. And you have to agree in those cases, I would argue, to grant anonymity to protect people, to be able to speak more freely about what their employer, in this case, the US government, is doing on behalf of the American people. And you weigh, is what they're telling me valuable enough that I should report it, even though I can't tell you who the name of this person is? What is the risk to the person who's telling me that? Like, are they the only person who could possibly know, even if I agree not to name them? Are they going to get fired anyway because nobody else had access to that memo or that meeting? And the last thing I would say is, we've done explainers on air about this, about the use of anonymous sources, why we use them. And there's a common misperception that I don't know who they are. That people are leaving me hot tips on the phone and I'm just racing to broadcast across America. And if anything, I go even beyond, the vetting and verifying and fact checking and reporting that I would do with you, Lindsay, where I can name you, when I'm dealing with an anonymous source, because I'm asking our audience, look, trust me, I can't tell you who this person is, and therefore it's my reputation on the line. I am telling, I'm asking you to trust that I have vetted this person, that they are who they say they are, that they're in a position to know what they're saying to me. And so it's I've never reported something from an anonymous source who I didn't know who they were and had a relationship with them.
That's very interesting. Well, let's move on. People just don't trust the media right now. At a time when Americans are relying heavily on the news for information about the pandemic, the election, and all this that is 2020, Gallup reports that the public remains largely distrustful of the mass media. 60% of Americans say they have not very much trust or none at all. How has the rhetoric from the Trump administration played a role in this? Or is it just part of a continued decline in trust in media that we've seen over the past few decades?
The Trump administration rhetoric, I think, does play a role. If the president of the United States is telling you from all the authority that role carries, don't trust the press, it's fake news, they're the enemy. There are going to be people who believe it. I think the media is not blameless here by any stretch. There is a lot of partisan reporting and retweeting of things you haven't read. I just noticed this week, I don't know if anybody else has noticed, somebody tweeted out one of my NPR interviews and had an interesting comment about it. And I went to retweet it and Twitter made me stop. It put up a flag and said, "Don't you want to read the article first before you retweet?"
I saw that. Yeah.
I thought, okay, but it's my interview. Like, I know exactly what it was. But it made me go through and click through I had to prove that I'd gone through and at least tried to listen to it or read the transcript before it would let me retweet it. I had not seen that before. And I thought, that's great. That's great. Because, we are all guilty of, in the crazy 24/7 hyper fast news environment that we live in, repeating something, whether that is in the form of retweeting an article that you haven't read and fact checked every word of to worse, we're all guilty of it. And the media definitely plays a role in this. I find it simultaneously super depressing and understandable that Americans have less trust in the media than they once did. It's, the media, we are citizens, we are Americans, and our work mirrors what is going on in our society. And we're at a super divisive and distrustful, poisonous feeling moment. And so, yeah, people are going to feel that, reflected in the way that they consume media. I know, there's no easy answer to this. We're never going to go back, if there ever was some glory days of, the 6 p.m. news where a super authoritative white male anchor who looked like your great granddad is going to come on and tell you the facts, and everybody's going to tune in and watch it and agree these are the facts. I don't think it ever existed, and we're certainly not going back to anything resembling that. I will say one thing we have tried to do, and that I am trying to do, at every opportunity, is just that it's not enough to say, hey, we're the mainstream media, trust us. Be more transparent about why we're doing what we're doing, how we're doing what we're doing, pulling back the curtain a little bit on the agonizing internal debates that we have in our newsroom every day over how to cover things, how to try to be fair, how to try to get you the truth. The discussion that I just referenced about anonymous sources is one of those, because I had quoted anonymous sources in a story I'd done, and got all this voicemail saying I don't trust these fake anonymous sources. It came up in the Pompeo interview where he said, I asked him something and he said, well, I don't know what your unnamed sources are telling you. And I pushed back and said, it's not an unnamed source. It's your senior advisor, career diplomat of 4 decades. And here's his name. And he just testified this under oath, quote, not an unnamed source. You can't push back like that in every occasion, but the media needs to be prepared to do so when we can, and needs to explain when we can't, why we're using anonymous sources. We are trying to do this more at NPR, just explaining, we have these big agonizing internal debates about what language we use. And the memos go out about what is acceptable to say on air or not. But how would our listeners know that? How do they know why we're choosing to call, use a certain verb or not, or use a certain name for something or not, or refer to a group by this name versus the other, or, a recent one was about to do with Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, alleged plot to kidnap her. Crazy. Is the appropriate term for the people who were planning that militia. That's a really loaded term these days. Why did we use it or not use it? We have these discussions, the guidance circulates, but trying to be more explicit about explaining to people. So we did an interview on All Things Considered about, here's the term, here's the background, here's why we used or didn't use it in this occasion versus another occasion, and doing more of that, I hope, just reminds people, okay, they are actually being thoughtful. I might not agree with the way that they phrase this or their decision to cover this and not this, but here's why they did it. Because, we don't get it right every time, but we are trying to be intentional. We're trying to get it right every time.
Well, given, all the confusion around who to trust, who to go to, on a more personal level, my student Julie wants to know, what's your best advice for evaluating a credible news source or detecting media bias? What are some concrete examples of how you discern good news, good journalism?
So the question to me of how I know who to trust as I'm trying to consume news, the track record of if they got it right. I mean, I always go, you look through, and if there's often a sensational headline, I hate to say, and then you read and you're on paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you're like, where is the evidence that supports that headline? And sometimes you get there eventually, sometimes not.
So you're looking for the evidence that supports the headline?
Yeah.
You're looking for a track record.
I'm looking for a track record if it's a particular organization or a particular journalist. Have they been right on this before? Do they seem to be well sourced? Are they actually in the place that they're reporting from? Do they seem to have access to people who are there? It's hard in the pandemic. Most of us are, grounded, literally. But trying to look at just, what is the evidence they cite? What are the quotes that they're citing? Have they made an effort to gather as many competing points of view on this as possible? And again, that speaks to something that we touched on in an earlier afternoon session, Lindsay, about, it's not about presenting the two sides of every story. For almost every story, there are more than two sides, and one side might be right. The other is just not. So that's something I think about a lot. You can be accurate without being entirely truthful as a reporter, if that makes sense. I mean, a basic example, you could be assigned, as I have been, to cover a Trump press conference. You could cover it verbatim, get every quote right, cover it completely and thoroughly, and put it out there. Would you have served up the truth to your listeners and audience? And I say this not in a partisan way, but given the track record of this president and his willingness to put things out there that are demonstrably untrue, I would say you probably haven't, as a journalist, done your job. So that's what we're trying to figure out. What is the job now? How do you get the truth out there? It's a challenge, and I mean, I can only say that one of the things that gives me comfort as a journalist is that this has been a challenge for journalists since the beginning of journalism. Is that none of us are neutral. Nobody's striving for that. But how do you get as close as you can to the truth without injecting yourself into it and making it biased and giving it an opinion and all the rest of it? So it is not easy, but we are trying.
Well, what are your thoughts on, I teach the history of media and politics, and, the early part of our democracy was extremely partisan press. It was openly partisan press. Yeah. Is it better to, it was just in the early 20th century that we started to see journalists becoming more professionalized and saying, we're objective. We have these, norms of objectivity and fairness. And is there a best model? Like, is one better than the other? Like, should journalists just say, hey, I'm partisan on this side and here's what I think?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, is there room for a middle ground to ask a difficult question?
I think there is. You raise a point that we have debated at my dinner table regularly. My husband is born and raised in Scotland, and the press there is more partisan, or you could say more transparent. Depends how you're coming at this. But the newspapers there, not just the editorial pages, but the reporting staffs tend to be a little more open about what their political agenda, bias, views are that they're bringing to the table and to their reporting. And my husband argues that that is totally the way to go, and that Americans are deluded in thinking there's anything resembling a mainstream unbiased press. To which I guess I disagree. We're humans. We're all flawed. We're all biased. We all have opinions, of course. I see huge value in the traditional mainstream media that this country has fostered, and that continues to thrive, and that I would argue, if anything, in recent years has been not defeated but reinvigorated. I just think there's plenty of people out there telling you what to think. I don't think that anybody cares what I tell you to think. That's not my job. My job is to be curious, to ask the questions that occur to me as I try to make sense of some of the bizarre times that we are living through, and to bring you every night what I managed to find out, like what I know and how I know it. I was then, this has been, it's harder to do than it sounds. I was having flashbacks listening to a podcast just yesterday about the last disputed election in the United States, which of course was Bush versus Gore in 2000.
Oh, on the Daily?
I was listening to the Daily. It was a great podcast. Hats off to them. Just reliving quite how epically bonkers that the whole, the election and the 30 whatever days that followed were. And it's something I found myself explaining now that I work with many producers and editors who were, toddlers at best in 2000, and have no direct memory of it. And I remember being like the most rookie JV anchor of all time at the BBC in London that night. And it was my big shot because for once they were happy to have an American accent on the air, covering the US elections. And so I was anchoring out of London and doing, the watching, just trying to figure out, they would open my mic at the top of every hour and I'm giving like the big headline on what's happening. And I'm sitting there, sweat rolling down my neck as the clock is clicking to the top of the hour, thinking, I have no idea what is happening or what to say. And you can, you sit in the control room on one side of the soundproof glass and it's very calm where you are, and you can see utter chaos as editors are screaming and throwing things and phones are ringing off the hook on the other side. And you think, oh my God, like nobody knows what's happening or quite how to say that. And it's going to be me in 5 seconds, 4, 3. What do you say? And hour after hour, we did some version of, I have absolutely not a clue what's happening in Florida tonight.
If we can,
knowing how you know it.
If we can, let's time travel back to 2000. So the news media thought they had a winner in the VP Al Gore. Then they rescinded that, saying Florida was too close to call. This is for all those millennials and Gen Zers out there, just a summary. After 2 a.m. the next morning, the networks finally called Florida for Bush. This began a chaotic recount that led to protests and claims of voter fraud, and finally a judicial halt to the recount, declaring Bush the winner. Do you see any similarities between that year and 2020? Could a similar story play out over the next days or weeks? We've got election day coming up next Tuesday. Or has early voting and technology made this somehow easier to count these votes? Are we going to see a 2020 scenario, or I'm sorry, 2000 scenario again in 2020?
My God, I certainly hope not, but I think all predictions are off at this point. Early voting means we now are already, where are we? It's Wednesday. We've got 6 days to go, and already we're past the 50% mark of the number of Americans who cast a ballot in 2016. I don't see any way that this is not record turnout. Counting them is another story. We've got, as we've been talking, reports rolling in from the Supreme Court where they are ruling on what's going to happen in Pennsylvania and how late your ballot can come in and still be counted. I don't see any way that this doesn't go to litigation. I honestly wish I could say otherwise. The thing that makes it a little bit worse than 2000, in 2000, it was heavily litigated. The stakes could not be higher. You're talking about the President of the United States, and they roll in the big lawyers and it goes to the Supreme Court. And by the way, the detail you just left out in that recounting is that the governor of Florida, the state in question, is the brother of, the Republican candidate for president.
Right.
I mean, it was so crazy. And maybe I'm naive, but there was a sense that this, they were going to fight this tooth and nail all the way up and appeal it, and it went to the Supreme Court, but that once the court ruled, that both parties would respect the decision, whichever way it fell. And that is what happened. The court ruled, and the next day Al Gore conceded. What worries me a little bit more now, if I'm being honest, is that whenever we get a result that is certified by states and the litigation has played itself out to whatever point it reaches, I don't know that you have a scenario where both candidates accept that wholeheartedly and graciously. And I don't know that even if that bridge is crossed, you have a scenario where half the country isn't outraged and protesting and not accepting the results of the election. That's where we are, and that is scary. That said, it gives me heart that so many people are voting, that so many people are voting early, that there have not been significant problems. We've seen lines that have been way too long. You should not have to spend your entire day in line to vote in Georgia or other places where that has happened. I sincerely hope that all of the early voting means that's not where we are come Monday and Tuesday, with people trying to vote and giving up after they've sat in line for 8 hours. That would be a travesty. But the fears so far of voter intimidation at the polls has not come to, from extremist groups, that has not come to pass yet. Mail-in voting appears to have, reached people, and the ballots have flooded back in so far. We are now, for the record, past the point where in almost every state you should be voting by mail. If you were planning to vote by mail, check with your local and state authorities, but generally speaking, change your plan. Go vote in person. I know it's an inconvenience. I know we're all worried about COVID safety. Vote in person or find a way to get your mail ballot either to an official drop box or to hand in directly to your local election officials. We're too late to be sure that the U.S. Postal Service is going to get it there. So there are a lot of questions. Right. The media is working. The courts are working. The system so far is working so far, and I'm reaching for wood to knock. I'm about to interview the head of U.S. counterintelligence on Friday, who was the one who put out the big statement over the summer about Russia and China and Iran. We'll get an update on what the foreign threats look like. But so far, there are no reports, no validated reports of widespread voter fraud. So, what we can do is be informed, vote, have a big cup of herbal tea or a big shot of brandy, whatever works for you. Try to get some good sleep this weekend, because I don't know what we're up for next week.
Well, on that note, let's now fast forward. Let's look in the crystal ball. It's November 4th, 2020. I read an article today in the New York Times. More people are buying guns. Americans bought 15.1 million guns in the 7 months this year from March through September. That's a 91% leap from the same period in 2019. Why do you think this is? And are we looking for potential violence on Election Day, no matter what the result, or post-Election Day?
It's a chilling question, and I won't pretend to be an expert on it. And one of the glories of my job is that I don't predict the future. It's outside. I'm barely managing to keep up, just trying to track what's unfolding as we speak and what unfolded an hour ago. So I won't venture a prediction on that. I mean, everybody listening will have access to the same reports I do, which is that international election monitors who come to the US to monitor our vote as we do theirs are worried about this election and the possibility of violence. There are fears about intimidation at the polls and protests that, I just was tracking something of 10 protests scheduled for DC between now and election day. And those are the big ones that have officially registered with the National Park Service. It's going to be wild, these next few days. Again, it's not my job to predict. I cling myself to the reassurance that thus far democracy has held, that media is operating. We're fact checking as fast as we can check. We're trying to put correct facts out there. We're trying to, it's not our job to urge action or lack thereof, but to provide context and information so that people can decide, make up their own minds about how they think these next days may unfold. And thus far, our democracy is holding. And I don't know. I look back to my grandparents and great grandparents who lived through threats that must have seemed, worse than this. As I was despairing the other day to my husband and saying, "Oh my God, it's all so horrible." And he looked at me and said, "You're saying that while eating really good takeout sushi and drinking a lovely bottle of wine in our nice heated house. So, there are no bombs falling. It could be worse." And I thought, you're right. It could be worse. Could be worse. Knock on wood.
All right. What would you have said to yourself a year ago if you had said, what could be worse? We could have bombs falling on us.
I tweeted recently on just I can't even remember what it was, but it felt like the craziest news day in a while, which is saying something. And I tweeted, remember how calm the beginning of 2020 felt when all we were dealing with was a presidential impeachment trial and nearly going to war with Iran. And it does kind of feel like that, like the quaint good old days before pandemic and, before the election hit fully its stride and the economy went off the rails and everything else that we were dealing with.
Absolutely. And I can say, talking with my students, and you talked with them today, they are uniquely primed into what's happening in politics today. I always joke that, or I've been joking since the pandemic, that I used to have to tell my students why politics matters to them. And I don't really have to explain that anymore because they see it. They see how it matters to them. It's inhibiting their freedom. It's inhibiting all sorts of things. Yeah. So,
but can I just say one thing on this, just before we move on? Just thinking about the long view. I interviewed Bob Woodward recently because of his book that made all kind of news. And we went through the whole, what the president knew and when about the pandemic and why didn't you, Bob Woodward, tell us sooner what you knew because he said it to you. Mm-hmm. We did all of that. And then we pivoted and talked about, you're sitting there with Bob Woodward, a guy who has covered every White House since Nixon, who covered Watergate, who didn't just cover Watergate, who
broke Watergate.
He broke Watergate. He was Watergate. And documented the unraveling of a presidency and a nation that felt so divided, and where nobody knew who to trust. And talked about how that compares to, okay, you did that and now you're covering Washington now. And what gives you hope? How different does this moment feel in terms of just feeling worried for the future of our democracy? And it's interesting, Bob Woodward is a reporter's reporter. He's not there to give you deep analysis on his deep feelings about any of this. He just wants to get the president to tell him something that hasn't said to anybody else and put it out there and make some news. That's his deal. But he did say he has never in trying to cover administration, has never encountered what he has for this most recent book, which was interviewing the most senior national security advisors to a president, and that they were persuaded that this president represented a threat to our democracy. And that he felt leadership of America has failed, his view, but the democracy has held. And I wouldn't presume to weigh in on some of that, but I will say, it's true and worth bearing in mind. Democracy has held. It will hold next week. We're going to be okay.
Well, that's very hopeful. I'm sure my students really appreciate that, and the audience appreciates that too. So we're going to head into the Q&A in a few minutes, but I want to ask you sort of a more personal question. I know you're a runner. I wanted to ask if this is something that helps you de-stress, particularly in an election year that also happens to be taking place in a pandemic with widespread social unrest over race and racism. And then to ask, what are some other ways you can recommend to our audience members? I know my students are stressed out. They're overwhelmed by the news. What are some ways you can recommend to them to sort of de-stress or to wind down over the next week, which is going to be pretty wild?
Well, I actually would invite anybody who has figured this out, please share your tips, because I have not. Like, bring on the tips. For me, it's, chug a bottle of tequila or go for a run. And that the latter is probably the better choice. It's almost, in a way, to me, the most comforting thing I can say is, like, I hear you and I'm right there with you. Like, nobody is sleeping in my house. Nobody's sleeping in the newsroom. I can, see on the screen, behind the screen, I'm talking to you on emails pouring in, planning for special live round the clock coverage starting soon, and God knows when it ends.
Right. We've already had some breaking news just since we talked earlier this afternoon.
Everybody is stressed out, and it's almost kind of helpful to just realize it's not just me. It's not just me. This is, whatever your politics, however you hope next week, or whenever we get the election results, however you hope it lands, to do this while we're all stuck at home and in the middle of a pandemic and people are really sick. I mean, it's crisis upon crisis upon crisis upon crisis. And it's hard. For me, running really helps. It is the one positive change I have made, I think, to my routine in the working from home era. Is I used to have a 45-minute commute every morning. So I would leave my house, I dropped my kids at school, I dropped my husband at work, and by the time I made it to the NPR parking garage, it was 45 minutes door to door. And I don't do that anymore. I just walk downstairs. And I used to just show up at my laptop 45 minutes earlier than usual. And then I thought, no, like I am reclaiming this time. And I've missed a couple of mornings, but pretty much every morning since April, I have gone either for a walk or a run outside, whatever the weather. That's going to get harder as the weather gets worse, but I'm going to keep doing it. And it has saved me mentally. And I don't listen to podcasts. I don't talk on the phone. And I also, as an aside, I wear hearing aids. I don't wear them when I run because I can't sweat and get them wet. And so it's just quiet. And sometimes I think through something productive. I'm trying to write something and I was stuck, and I'll think and the words will flow while I'm running. Sometimes I'm just thinking random thoughts, what to cook for dinner, but it's my time. And I do think more clearly when I'm running, and you start to sweat and the blood starts pumping. And I have found that super, super helpful. So that, and maybe a shot of tequila, if not.
All right. Well, we're going to get some questions in the queue here. I'm going to wrap up my last questions with you while our team, our producer, and our amazing students who are going to act as audience surrogates are going to get their questions together. If you still have questions that you want to ask Mary Louise Kelly, you can enter them into the chat, and they could be asked this evening by one of our students. So I want to ask you, before we jump to the Q&A, this question comes from my student Chelsea. She says, how do you feel about people getting their news from Twitter? People don't always read the full articles. You mentioned earlier that you were sort of notified, like, did you read this article? Actually, they might miss lots of details, but it also allows younger people to to engage more with news in a way that's more familiar to them in sort of a chat, sort of social media format. What do you recommend for our younger viewers tonight about how to consume news on social media?
Good question. I mean, Twitter is so fantastic, and I couldn't do my job without it, and is also the total bane of my existence. Because talk about relentless, it never ends. I mean, you can't possibly keep up with it. You look away for 30 seconds, depending on how many people you follow and what the news day is, you've missed, 14 news cycles. I will confess, I probably will not do this weekend, and I didn't do it last weekend, but I have for most of this year been on a strict Twitter ban over the weekend. I don't open it. I don't open any social media, and you do miss some stuff, but the trade-off is it's amazing and terrifying how much time just opens up. And I figure people who really need to reach me can call me or they can text me and I will answer my phone, but I'm not on Twitter on the weekend. So if you catch me tweeting over the weekend, tweet back and yell at me to shut the app.
Well, you told us a funny story earlier about something you missed. I think it was yesterday or the day before because you had been in a long interview.
It was yesterday in the run up to All Things Considered, and I was crashing to try to get an interview recorded and edited, and I opened up Twitter again right before we went on air, and had to get one of my younger, hipper producers to answer the question, which is why is everybody in my whole Twitter feed subtweeting somebody about gathering all their friends and being so privileged to go to a tropical island just to get away and forget everything going on in real life? And my producer was like, yep, Kim Kardashian, and I can send you the original tweet if you want, or you can just ignore it. I'm like, I think I'm good. I'm good. It's all I needed. Moving.
It is funny how like you log off for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days and you log back on and you're like, what is happening?
What is this crazy running joke?
So like what can students do? What can young people do? Like should they follow certain sources on social media that will be more reliable?
You should follow certain sources, who are posting things you're interested in, and also, that you might not necessarily agree with. Make sure you follow. If you're a Democratic voter who leans liberal, make sure you follow a few personalities on the conservative side of the spectrum. You should know what they are thinking. And the same goes in reverse. If you lean conservative, if you lean Republican, make sure you follow some MSNBC hosts and some more liberal commentators and some Obama alums and the rest. Know what they're thinking. They might cause you to think more deeply about, challenging you. Why do I think this is true? Or they might force you to think through a more nuanced, articulate argument for why you believe what you do. But it's incredibly useful to kind of be aware of what just the spectrum of, I'm not saying you have to follow complete whack jobs across the political spectrum, but the reasonable political spectrum, it's good to follow, a range of people.
The way I usually describe it is I say, diversify your portfolio, make sure that you have a wide variety of voices coming in. Even if you don't agree with them, you understand what's happening on the other side. And that helps you to be more persuasive if you're trying to make an argument on your side. But it also helps you maybe feel in tune to, what are the issues that are really concerning to people who don't agree with you. Yeah. Like you might find that those are ridiculous issues that you don't care about, but to see real people on the other side saying, this is something I'm passionate about, this is something I care about, helps you to see the humanity in them,
Very much. And that's super, super important. You may think you disagree with somebody and you might really disagree with somebody, but it's endlessly fascinating to find out, well, most of us are not insane or inherently evil. So there's a reason that even this person who I think I totally disagree with, why do they believe what they believe? Let me try to understand that. Even if I'm going to still disagree with them, let me understand what's animating them, because it's, it's somewhat comparable to foreign travel in a way. You arrive in a new country and you see things that are amazing and beautiful, but you also see things and think, that's crazy. Why do they do it that way? That's so weird. And if you take the time and ask people or live there for a while, you realize there's almost always a reason. people aren't going out of their way to do things in a weird way. There's a reason, a historical or a cultural or a geographic reason why they do things the way they do. I remember learning that, when I moved to Italy with my husband and kids a few years ago, while I was writing one of my novels, and we could not find coffee filters. We're like Americans trying to use coffee filters, so they're hard to find because Italians are not into that. But they didn't sell them with the coffee, and I couldn't figure out why. And the only place where you could buy them was in a tobacco store. I'm like, why? And I finally got talking to this old guy who was running his tobacco, and he talked about it during World War II when things were rationed. Tobacco was rationed and coffee was rationed, and you used to buy your coffee at the tobacco store. And so that's where the supplies that go with coffee were sold, and that's persisted. And I thought, that's so fascinating, and gave me this window into something I never would have known, and makes total sense now that I think about it. And they don't sell it in my grocery store because Italians can't be bothered with this stuff, but that's the way it used to work. There's always a reason. And that's kind of, if you're trying to figure out what somebody with different political views from you is, there's usually a reason. You might disagree with it. You might think they're wrong. You might wish they had more information, but there's usually a reason. And trying to understand that is critical to where we are now. I mean, what other path is there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2020, I know my students are taking this message from what's happening right now, because this is, for a college junior or senior to experience this pandemic in isolation is really jarring. But I think it's really giving them a moment to think about humanity and what it is to be part of a group, because we all so much want to be with other people right now. We all so much want to connect with other human beings. So I am always the optimist. I remain optimistic that we will come out of this, hopefully being stronger and being more respectful of each other. It's difficult right now, I get it, but I'm hoping that through conversations like these that we're having, Mary Louise, and conversations that I'm going to continue to have this semester, that all of our viewers are paying attention to, that it can help give people some hope. So, all right, without further ado, I want to begin the audience Q&A. So it's a little different this year, as I've mentioned in our previous sessions. Some folks on our end have been reading through all of your questions that have been submitted in the chat, and I've been watching these as well. There's still time to submit them, so if you want to submit something to the chat, make sure you do so. For each question, one of my students in my National Agenda class, who Mary Louise talked to earlier, they are going to read the question for the audience member. So let's start with Spencer. What's our first audience question, Spencer?
Ken Grant of Newark asks, today Miles Taylor, former Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security, came out as the author of the book, A Warning. Is this someone you've interviewed or know? And do you have any thoughts on this revelation?
I saw that news was breaking this afternoon while I was engaged in talking with y'all. So I have not read deeply beyond the headlines. And so I won't venture a deep comment beyond the headlines, other than having been intensely curious who Anonymous would prove to be. I noticed that the comment, I think out of the White House, Kayleigh McEnany, the White House spokesperson, has already, as one would expect, dismissed this. And I don't want to misquote her. I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but basically suggested this was a person who was fired quickly and for cause and had only served briefly. And this person was chief of staff to both, as I recall, Trump's first Homeland Security Secretary, and then the acting Chad Wolf, who followed. So was not a flash in the pan of this administration. There's obviously the question of, if he felt so strongly, should you have spoken up publicly and put your name on it? I mean, he has. He's done op-eds and been critical since leaving the administration. But obviously, it's just coming out now that he is the Anonymous who published the New York Times op-ed and the book that followed. It's not for me to judge. I really don't think it's for me to judge, his decision not to speak up publicly, not to quit and speak out. That's a question that I have put to many, many members of this administration who have left and then chosen to speak out immediately and written their memoir, or who have chosen to keep working, and you're constantly wondering why within this administration, or who have chosen to leave and then not speak publicly until they do. Jim Mattis being the prime example, who held his tongue for a long time and then didn't after the incident in Lafayette Park in June. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Our next question will come from the audience, will come from my student, Nick.
So Jim Parks asks, how are your day-to-day relations with colleagues from other media that have different political leanings?
Good. You know, my day job is not usually speaking to other journalists all the time. I'm trying to speak to sources and real people in Washington, around the country, and around the world. I had much more interaction in a way with journalists from other news organizations when I was a beat reporter, and so you're covering the same beat and competing in a collegial way against people from different news organizations who are coming at the story with different deadlines and different agendas and different pressures from you. The National Security Press Corps is a great, really interesting bunch, considering unlike most of the Washington press corps. If you cover the White House, in normal times, again, you go to the White House every day and there's a briefing and you have booths and you see each other every day.
Well, now, can I just interrupt? You say in normal times. What's
pre-pandemic. There are still reporters going to the White House, but it's harder right now on those. There are deeper security calculations in terms of who's going there and for how long, and all of that. Pre-pandemic, if you covered the White House, you had a hard pass, you went. I've covered the Pentagon, and you have a hard pass and you can go anytime you want and wander the halls. And if you're trying to, get a general to return your phone calls and he doesn't, you can figure out, where his office is and bump into him and, introduce yourself and ask a few questions. And when when the defense secretary or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs travel, you can go on the plane with them and, witness what they're doing and what deals they're cutting and what they're saying. When you cover the national security beat, like the intelligence beat, you can't just go wander around the CIA, bump into your colleagues. They don't hold press conferences. They're not going to tell you where the CIA director is traveling, and were you to find out, they're certainly not going to invite you on the plane. So it's a weird beat from that point of view in terms of knowing the colleagues who you're competing against. But an intimate bond in a way, because you're all kind of equally in the dark and trying to figure it out as you go. And yeah, it's a lovely mix of being very, very competitive and trying to figure out, you're always reading when they've got unnamed sources, who is that person? Sometimes you can immediately guess exactly who it is, often not.
Yeah, the way I describe it to my students when I'm teaching about media and politics is that there's this, particularly in campaigns, there's this sense of pack journalism where it's like you're saying, you're competing, but you're also sharing information to an extent that you feel you can still get ahead. So I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Let's continue with Rachel has a question from our audience.
Hey there, Kate from Wilmington wants to know if you can explain how you fact check information.
All kinds of ways, depends on the incident, depends on the information. Starts with the who am I talking to? How do I know person is who they say they are? Sometimes it's obvious. You're interviewing, Kamala Harris, and you're pretty clear that she is indeed Kamala Harris, in a position to speak with the authority of Kamala Harris. But fact checking who the person is, how they would have access to information. Again, I go back to covering the intelligence beat, where you're often dealing with classified information, and you ask one person what happened, and you can have a great source who is honestly trying to tell you, their best understanding of events, and they tell you about this top secret memo, and they're not going to give it to you, but you can get them to read paragraphs, and like, great source, impeccable source, but they only know what they know. They might not have been invited to the meeting an hour later, at which all the guidance from the previous memo and meeting were rescinded, and a decision was made to go in a totally different direction. You just never know what you don't know. So the fact checking sounds super obvious, but it's you're on the phone just constantly.
With lots of different people.
The more people you talk to, because you pick up just this random crumb that you wake up, at 2 a.m. and think, hang on, what was that one thing he told me? And you're going back through your notes and thinking, that doesn't square with this. And then that's the first call you make the next morning. And one of my colleagues at NPR, Tom Gelton, who covered the Pentagon for many years and now covers our religion beat, is famous for stairway edits. As a journalist on daily deadlines, you're reporting, but then you have to write your story and get edited and file, and that's all got to happen before the deadline. And some reporters who I'm eternally jealous of, their story is done, they're relaxing, they're like sipping a margarita, an hour before deadline. Never happens to me. And Tom Gelton sets the standard for tormenting his editors, because he's writing his script on his phone as he's doing, I call it a stairway edit, because in our old building you had to walk from where the reporters were to the studios where we filed. So you're on the stairs doing the edit literally 2 minutes before this is going to air nationwide. Drove editors crazy, but it works because he's just never stops working the phone. He's always curious and has one more question that he wants to answer. And I, learned from that. He's a couple decades ahead of me in covering this stuff. And I learned from that. If you think you understand everything about this story and you've nailed it, pick up the phone and make another call, because I guarantee you haven't. So, there's all kinds of obvious ways that you fact check with databases. We have researchers, we have producers who are going back through original documents. If you hear me say a quote on air, it has been double and triple checked that our wording is exactly right, that we get the title right, that we've checked the dates, which is not to say, I think it was sometime within the last month, I authoritatively told you this is All Things Considered from NPR News. It's Tuesday, September 2nd, and it aired, and I get a text that's like, actually, it's Wednesday. I'm so sorry. People are confused enough as it is. I can't believe I just did that, but yeah.
Oh, how funny.
It happens.
So I'd like to ask, just because I listen to NPR and All Things Considered regularly, there's a real collegiality among, you and Ari Shapiro and all the other reporters that come on. Like, are you guys, this sounds kind of fangirly, but are you guys like friends? Do you guys like hang out?
Yeah, we do. It's one of the worst things about this pandemic is never getting to see. It's an intimate relationship with your co-host, because you are usually too busy even to say hello, as just the freight train of the day. You're doing different interviews and running around. But then at like 3:45 every day, 15 minutes before air, the building-wide page will go out if you're not sitting in Studio 31 pre-taping billboards and ready to go, because we're going on air in 15 minutes, and the director will have a complete meltdown if you're not in there. And for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, you are locked in a soundproofed, sealed off room with one other person who does exactly the same job you do and knows exactly, the pressures on you, and who has, you do this more than a few times and you have saved each other. Yesterday on air, I had an interviewee who will not be named, but who just would not stop talking. And we have no wiggle room live on air. I can't let it go an extra 30 seconds. I can't let it go an extra 1. It's that tight. I got to hit exactly when you hear me say from NPR News, it's to the second 5 times an hour. Super frustrating when you have somebody really interesting saying something fascinating. or just when they're babbling on and they just never pause for breath and you're like, we gotta go. So anyway, Ari rescued me from an interview that was never going to end otherwise. And I am eternally grateful. And it took all of about 14 minutes before I repaid the favor and saved him from something that was crashing. So yeah, we're friends. Ari's doing okay. He's gotten 2 dogs during the pandemic and grown a really enviable herb garden from which he's constantly sending me pictures of, wish I could share my beautiful tomatoes and basil. That's okay.
Well, let's take another question from the audience. And this time we're going to have Melissa asking the question.
Hi, Pamela of Alexandria, Virginia wants to know, did you ever feel you and your family were at risk of retaliation from the administration, including a threat to your personal safety and the personal safety of your family after the interview of Pompeo?
Thank you for the question. No is the short answer. No, I didn't. I do, just as a matter of course, I don't list my address in the phone book. I don't post pictures of my kids on social media because they're minors and they're also teenagers and would never forgive me at this point. But also I just try to keep them out of it because we do, aside from the Pompeo interview, we get a ton of mail, email, voicemail, tweets. Some of it is lovely and nice and conducive to productive conversation, and some of it is pretty awful and directly threatening. I did receive, not from anyone, not retaliation from the administration, but I did receive some pretty threatening, directly personal threatening things after that interview. And worked with the head of NPR security on changing a few of my routines and public appearances. And then the pandemic hit, and now I never have any public appearances, so it's off the table. But no, I sincerely, did not worry about that. I have had occasion to worry about it more in some of the foreign reporting I've done in war zones or just in countries with regimes that have a track record of not always being wonderful, with Western reporters determined to go around and ask nosy questions. And there is, again, without going into details of it, there's extensive security training that goes into that. I do hostile environment training every 3 years, and that extends to everything from flying into the Middle East to going and covering political rallies here in the States, unfortunately, to, in June, when I flew down to Atlanta to cover the protests there when briefly they turned violent, and, was issued body armor to go report from my hometown, full body armor and helmet, and we took it because reporters were being targeted.
All right, we'll take the next question from my student, Mia.
Hi. Nicholas Simmons asks, would you say there have been more instances during the current administration of sources in government refusing to speak to you on the record than during previous administrations? If so, why?
No, if anything, it's been a little bit the reverse. I've had access to, I have not interviewed this president. I would love to. There's an open invitation to President Trump to come on NPR and take our questions. I have interviewed multiple members of his cabinet and senior officials, and they take your calls. The interviews are professional, and you're never trying to go in to do a combative interview. That's not the point, but you do ask tough questions, and if they don't get answered, you keep asking them, and sometimes that gets tense. It's a fascinating thing covering this administration. You think about, we live in an era of Twitter and YouTube, and a president who knows that and avails himself of that regularly. Why do they take any of our interviews? I mean, it's a genuine question. It's fascinating to me. Why do they feel the need to sit down with members of the press? There's no constitutional obligation for the president or anybody who works for him to do so. And yet they do. And it drives the national conversation. It's how we learn things as an American public that we wouldn't otherwise have known. And it's what gives me courage when doing these interviews is knowing that it's actually a total joy and privilege to be able to ask those questions and hold people to account, whether it's this administration or any other. You ask somebody a question, they dodge it. You ask again, they dodge it. You follow up in a different way. Things start getting tense. And I always just feel all of you, like this weight on my shoulders and on my back, kind of leaning me forward. And I think, okay, they deserve an answer. Like they don't deserve to hear you dodge that question. He doesn't, or she doesn't, whoever I'm interviewing, they don't owe me an answer, but they owe all of you an answer, or they deserve to hear me ask it often enough and follow up enough with specifics that in a respectful way, it becomes clear this person really isn't going to answer it or doesn't have a good answer. And that's what we come to do is to hold people to account. And that's a good day when you have the opportunity to do that. And this administration has actually been remarkably, they take interviews. I was at the White House, I guess for the last time. It was the second week of March, the week that everything shut down for an off the record thing, but laying the groundwork to something in future. And in general, an interview like Pompeo that unfortunately got more contentious than I certainly would have cared for it to have. If you hold your ground and you ask fair questions, you keep getting interviews. People are smart. They hear what's happening, and they want that platform. They want to reach the people who NPR reaches. And just as an aside, this administration has aggressively gone after leakers and journalists who publish information that came to them through leaks. It has not stopped the flow. When information is not able to get out there and facts are not being corrected from the White House lectern, people find other ways to do it. And I find a whole lot of people will take the call.
All right, well, let's take another audience question. And my student Eleni is going to ask this one.
Hi, Peggy Thomas says, you called this bizarre times that we're living in. In your opinion, do you believe that this country will recover and go back to normal if the current president leaves office in January 2021? Or will we ever recover if he stays in office another 4 years?
So, again, I don't want to dodge your question, having just given you a sermon on why it's important not to dodge questions. I will say I'm so happily not a political analyst or a crystal ball pundit. I don't know. One of the questions in my mind is, whatever the ultimate outcome of this election, what led us as a country to this point isn't about one person, and there's no one person who can fix it or perpetuate it. It's looking at cause and effect, at symptom and underlying condition, and I think that this country will take I think it's going to take a while. There's a lot of work to be done I had some hope early in the pandemic that this would bring us together, because I was interviewing so many people who were hopeful despite all the bleakness and who were coming together. And I wondered if this was a disruption of the level that it would knock us off the kind of track of toxic political discourse that we've been on. And again, I genuinely say this with no partisan or political agenda, just as an American who has found it really hard and dispiriting to watch the way our political conversation has unfolded in recent years. And and sadly, I don't think that my hopes were necessarily. We've seen amazing and heroic individuals rise to the occasion, and we continue to do that. But I can't say that our country feels any less partisan and toxic and divided than it did before. So there's a lot of work to be done. But again, I am also an optimist. I don't know what the choice is other than to each do our little part, and it is. After the Pompeo interview, I can't even tell you how many letters and notes I got from people identifying themselves, lifelong Republican. Thank you for defending the Constitution. Thank you for defending the First Amendment. Thank you for asking the questions that the press in a free and fair democracy need to ask. And I say that not, in praise of anything I did, but as because I can assure you that the critical, gripes that come in, fair or unfair, would take us all night to work through. Those come in all the time, and that's fine. But I say it as an example of, as journalists, I'm under no illusion that I or anybody else in my profession is saving the world or saving democracy every day. Of course not. But we have the chance to try. And that feels to me like such a blessing. Not everybody in every job can say that. It is invigorating, and it gives me courage every day to keep coming back and doing it. This idea that we can ask tough questions, we can hold people to account in the service of trying to figure out why something happened, what might happen going forward, in the service of affecting change. You can do one interview like that and it gives you faith, and it should, that this pillar of our democracy is working. Are we perfect? Of course not. Have we gotten a million things wrong, from bad predictions over what would happen with the 2016 election? Absolutely. Should we be held accountable and do it better? Yes. But do we have the chance to try to hold, this line? Yes. And that feels good, and that feels important every day.
I think we've got a good follow-up question that Melissa can ask. So let's go to Melissa.
Hi, this is from Caroline from New York. She's asking, do you think Pompeo would have treated you that way had you been a male reporter?
I have no idea, having never been a male reporter. I will say that I heard from more than one, multiple reporters who have dealt with him and who described almost verbatim conversations as the one that I had with him, including comments that I've never to this day reported. Specific words and language and views that were expressed that I have never reported, and people, other reporters who have covered him in his various roles have said they've had similar conversations. And some of those were male reporters. So I don't know. I don't actually know that my gender has anything to do it, and I will say I've been asked this as a girl who's covered national security for years, which remains a predominantly male arena. Was it a disadvantage? Is it a disadvantage? Is it a disadvantage to report from some of the countries I've reported from in the Middle East and other parts of the Muslim world as a woman? And if anything, I have always felt like no. Particularly reporting overseas, I have access to half the population that my male colleagues don't have. You go in, Tom Jelton or any other male colleague I work with at NPR, they can't go talk to women in Iran or Pakistan or Iraq or Saudi Arabia or some of the other places that I've been lucky to report from, whereas I can talk to all the men. So yeah, I don't know, but I have no reason to think that gender was a particular issue in that episode.
Well, we could go on forever. This has been such an interesting year. You've had such an interesting year covering what's happening in the Trump administration and the Secretary of State. I do want to wrap this up and introduce what we're going to be doing next. So
Sure.
I'd like to, at this point, I'd ask for a big round of applause for Mary Louise Kelly. We can't really do that, but
I give it back. Thank you for great questions and for hosting. This was so much fun. Thank you.
this is great. Thank you so much for being here. So I just have a couple of announcements before we wrap up. This is our last conversation before Election Day. We have two more that are going to be analyzing this election. We are going to be looking at November 11th, we'll be talking to Julia Yaffe, whose expertise in Russian politics and interference in US elections will be a timely conversation. We likely may not know the results of the election at this point on November 11th. She's been doing a lot of work on what's happening in Russia. And then I want to end by inviting all of our University of Delaware community, students, faculty, staff, to our quadrennial election central event. Usually this is held in person. We have a couple thousand students coming out, eating ice cream, popcorn, etc., celebrating the first time that they have voted. It's going to be virtual this year, but you can join us before the polls close. It's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. Hear from experts about polling, the Electoral College, and what to expect as the returns come in. We'll also hear from a psychologist who studies mindfulness in the brain. She's going to give us a brief mindfulness practice to help us de-stress a little bit, as Mary Louise has suggested we need to do sometimes. And we'll talk with students about maintaining good mental health during stressful times. It will be good prep as we head into what is likely to be a very long night / week / month, potentially. So join us November 3rd, starting at 6 p.m. You can go to cpc.udel.edu/election central to learn more. So thank you so much, Mary Louise. It's been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you so much to our audience for coming out from all over the country. Good night, and I look forward to seeing you before the election on November 3rd.